Is that right? Okay, good.
I'll bring in my remote keyboard for you. You can do it in your own room.
I've got it on one thing. That's one.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Right, we are live, everybody. So, good evening and welcome to the October 11th meeting of the Planning Committee, Buckingham Town Council. Do we have any members of the public wish to address us tonight? No, thank you. In that case, we can start with the meeting with apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillor Lisa.
Fine, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Receive declarations of any personal prejudicial interest under consideration on the agenda. No, no declarations, thank you. Minutes, you've all seen the minutes of Monday 13th of September Planning Committee, which we put to the Council on the 22nd. Anyone happy with those? Thank you. Item 4, Buckingham Neighbourhood Plan, Vale of Aylesbury Plan, to receive and discuss the notes of the NP working group meeting held on the 14th of September 2001. They are on the agenda pack under Appendix A. Anyone got any comments on that meeting? No, the main things coming out of it are that we are going to move ahead with the VALP allocation of social and or affordable housing. It's been suggested one way of meeting our 35% in the neighbourhood plan is to perhaps go for 25% affordable and 10% social housing, do it somewhere like that. We will have to prove our case though to Buckinghamshire Council if we want that 35%. Design codes are something else on there which we are going to be working on, and at the next meeting there will be a draft survey and proposal to the working group for replies so we can continue. And we're starting to engage with other local organisations. Councillor Stutchbury.
One thing we might have to consider is the council's Buckinghamshire Council looking at Article 4, which is to do with town centre developments. It's supposed to be a paper. My good colleague Alison has been questioning these matters both in council and in cabinet, and it appears that they, at the last meeting, they said they're going to be bringing some paper forward on Article 4 directives. These are to do with the landscape in the town centre and the development of the bus shops and whatever. Now, clearly, until we see the report, we won't know what it's saying. It might be something we need to Sheena to look at when they publish the report, which I'm not looked and I didn't see it. The cabinet member report for next meeting for the 19th should go up. It might be on there. It might be in the next cabinet meeting it goes to, but that was the response that was given to Alison, because there is some concern about the town centre changing, the landscape of the town centre changing with developments and losing footfall of shops and many of the new Class E. So that will be something which I think we'll all be interested in. As I say, Alan's been leading that discussion from down south, and she's doing a fine job.
Thank you, Robin. Sheena, if we could just ask Sheena, as our town plan officer, have you got any comments on that meeting?
Sorry, mute button is being particularly difficult tonight. No, I will keep an eye open for that, and if the committee wishes me to do so, I'm quite happy to report back on it. Fine,
so you're quite happy with progress at the moment?
Yes.
Good, thank you for that. Councillor Hardy, John?
Yeah, one thing we discussed that isn't in the minutes was a request. I think we agreed to see whether we can use the design code as a method for making our plan more carbon neutral, so that we could maybe somehow nudge in some requirements around maybe grey water recycling or requirements around solar panels and so on. if there's a way in which we can slip that in, if you like, under the wire, to kind of update and refresh and modernise our plan through the design code. I hope that Roger will take that on.
Yes, I think in fact we did discuss it, didn't we? But we were told that the LTPI going to have the Environment, Climate Change and Ecology codes published in the autumn. I think we were waiting to see what they
Yeah,
were.
but if Roger can do some thinking about it as well anyway, and then
Fine.
mash the two together, that'll be good.
We'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Try.
Is it appropriate to ask about the healthcare within plan allocated sites?
Very much so. Perhaps you could address that to Sheena. Did you get that, Sheena, about healthcare?
Yeah, because the two sites, Verney and North End, have been decreed as community assets or something. But I think that was related to our plan because we had them marked as such. So would that change, or could we make it? You know, not could we make it, but would that help any future healthcare within the town?
The community assets, if they've been designated as community assets, that's a sort of standalone process from the neighbourhood plan anyway, although it's covered by the same legislation. So if I'm understanding you correctly, Councillor Try, it won't be affected if we were to change the neighbourhood plan, because, as I say, the community asset designation would still stand. But obviously, community asset designation means that if they are put up for sale, I think it's 6 months staying on it, so that the community can decide whether or not they wish to make a bid for it. So it will depend, obviously, on what the owners of the buildings wish to do with them going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, then Councillor Davis.
I think that's to do with the hospital stroke, whatever, but when we looked at community assets, I recall that we tried to get the hospital in as a community asset, and apparently it wasn't counted as a community asset. So you raised a strange one there, Martin, why a building doctor's surgery would be a community asset and why a hospital which delivers a vast range of services wouldn't be. I think we should, through the chair, is work on finding out all the detail of that and maybe see what can be done, because you raised a very good point that the regulations are the regulations and they have to be assessed under them. So I would imagine that they shouldn't be too much a surprise to them, because I'm sure that the doctor's surgery looked into all that when they applied for their application and would have known that they were community assets, I would imagine. Why wouldn't they? I couldn't imagine that they wouldn't.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask the question, are we talking about them being assets of community value, which is the listing of a place where such as a doctor's surgery, or such as a hospital, or such as a pub or a community centre, etc., listed under the regulations, or are they marked in the Buckingham Town Plan as being healthcare assets, or healthcare assets?
Yeah, I think probably Sheena again is the one to answer that.
I think there's a big difference in the two.
In the if memory serves me, from the neighbourhood plan, we left it fairly open, because at that point there was a discussion going on, even at that point, about the amalgamation of the health sites, the doctor surgeries within the town. I think we didn't preclude those sites no longer being used as a doctor's surgery, providing obviously there was if you like, a better facility brought forward at the time. So I don't think they are specifically designated as health sites going forward, providing there is a new facility brought forward.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and the listing of somewhere as an ACB, asset of community value, is quite a protracted process. So I think the council would remember, have they gone through that process in order to get those sites listed as such.
Yeah, thank you. Robin?
Councillor Daly, I don't remember us going through a protracted consultation. You're absolutely right. What would have done is we would have noted them down as being community assets, as you rightly said.
But that doesn't give them
that doesn't give them the same level of what it was, because we were looking at the same period when I said we wanted to get the hospital registered, and we were told it couldn't
yeah,
be.
so therefore about 6 months being put on the market rule, I don't think would apply to those sites.
I think that's a question best addressed to the practice to know what they're doing. Purely they would, as I said earlier, they must have known when they went into their planning or what was around it, and they put them in. We had them here, and they were discussed here. They haven't been discussed elsewhere. They're probably still with officers, so I think we just need to see what it might be interesting to ask them what their intentions are, maybe, as not that we should comment on a planning application, but we could just ask them what their intentions are.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Sheena, anything else you want to add on the neighbourhood plan?
I don't think so at the moment. I'm continuing to work on the evidence base for the affordability question. And obviously I've been doing some work on side work on what's coming up further on in the agenda in relation to the knowledge arc, but no, I don't think I have anything else to add.
Thank you very much. Right, can we move on then to action reports, item 5. We've got a number of action reports there. Ones that are outstanding at the moment: the bypass bridge, we're waiting for Councillor White to respond. Trees, we're waiting for Mr. Passmore to be able to come and meet us, discuss trees in Buckingham. Town Hall frontage, Councillor White, we're waiting to respond, and we're still waiting for updates on the Oddfellows Hall, ongoing unauthorised work. Councillor Harding.
There's an action listed that I was going to, well, Rob and I were going to draft a letter. For the life of me, I don't remember signing up to this, but it certainly hasn't been done, has it, Rob?
The street lighting in Tindrick.
Yeah, the street lighting, but obviously that's an outstanding issue. I mean, obviously, I don't know where we're coming on to the 30-mile speed limit proposal. Is that somewhere else on the agenda? Hang on, let me finish, Rob, and hold on. And so I think we still need to write that letter, and I think it also needs to be expanded to include the need for crossings, because there are no crossings for people living on the new estate who are going to have to cross a road, albeit hopefully with a 30-mile speed limit. But I think the issue really is also, of course, about the street lighting. So just a question of clarification: are we coming on to this later in the agenda, or are we going to talk now about the matters pertaining to the, shall we say, the safety of Tindrick Road in its broadest terms? Should we talk about it now with relationship to this?
Well, there is also an item on the next page: speed reduction, Tindrick Road, costing 30 miles per hour.
Yeah. Well, let's try and wrap it all together then.
Yeah. Happy with that.
What we know is that there is now an extant proposal out for consultation to install a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit on the roundabout at the end of the Tindrick Road, such that traffic coming from either direction towards that roundabout will be reduced to 30 miles per hour. And if they exit onto the Tindrick Road, they will stay at 30 miles per hour down to Westfields. Although according to the information that Catherine sent me, for some weird reason, the 30 mile per hour speed limit is lifted as it enters the new housing estate, which I find slightly curious, given that we want the housing estate to be at least 30 miles per hour. Perhaps as heralding a 20-mile speed limit on the estate, of course, which would be altogether a very good thing, given our other discussions we've had on that matter hitherto. So I think it's a good thing. I'm a little bit concerned that this could be set up to fail, in that if we're putting in a 30-mile speed limit on the roundabout, there are no other roundabouts on the bypass around the town that are 30-mile-per-hour speed limits. And what I'm worried about is that people will object to an A road having a 30-mile speed limit, albeit on a roundabout you can't do much more than 30 on anyway. But they'll still object to it, and that could then knock the whole thing into oblivion. So I think if we're going to respond to that consultation, I don't know again whether we can do that from this meeting. I think we ought to be saying absolutely the Tindrake Road should be 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, but actually it makes more sense to start a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit between the Ragline roundabout and the Tindrake Road roundabout, and keep that going all the way around the rest of the bypass, as it would then be, because there is this weird gap, isn't there, just after the Gorgot Road roundabout and the Tindrake Road roundabout, which goes up to the 60-mile-per-hour speed limit, and then back down to 50, and then back up to 70 as it goes around Tindrake. It would make much more sense.
Yeah, if I could just stop you for one moment. This is going on to the agenda for the next planning meeting on November the 1st. It's already been
Okay, all right.
because there is a consultation about the speed limit.
Okay, all right, we'll discuss it then. Okay, fine, but the issue remains though, that there's the issue of speed, but the issue is also that the nights are getting darker, we see it behind you, Chair, that people can no longer walk back under street lights from the town into their homes on the new estate on the Tindrake Road, the St Rumbold's estate that's now been called. In my view, this is a breach of the Section 106. In my view, the Section 106 was very clear that there should be a cycle path put in, and that should be illuminated all the way, not just the length from where the entrance starts to the new estate up to where the other entrance is on the other side of the road. So I think we need to ask again. Now, I'm happy to draft a letter, but I'm not quite sure why it was down to me, Robin, to draft this letter. But I just think we need to raise that again, and maybe deploy the good offices of Councillor Cornell, who appears to have helped us significantly with the 30-mile speed limit. Perhaps she can support this as well, maybe, and also help us in our claim on that. But I also think we ought to be starting now to campaign for some proper crossings on that road. If you have to leave that estate, you've got a 3-year-old child on one hand and an 18-month-old child on the pram. You've got to get across a rather small crossing onto the other side. You have no choice. You can't go down the other side when there's no path anyway. And there's no zebra, there's no pelican crossing. I think that is a terrible matter that's been left out of the Section 106. And who the heck knows why that was not covered when the application was approved. And it shows yet again the value of involving us at the very beginning of the Section 106 negotiations.
Councillor Starchbury.
Now, I'll wind it back through a bit. I've met 3 officers on the 27th in regards to all elements around Section 106, which were obvious to me. One element has happened already. If you notice, if you go down the Tindrake Road, the third island which was put in is now being removed because it was put in far too early and it wasn't quite in the right place. So that island, which we had trouble in, those islands are going to be illuminated with solar lights. I also discussed, which I'm waiting for the response back from 3 officers, over the Section 106, which you referred to, the Railway Walk. The Railway Walk Section 106 and the roundabout Section 106, those discussions were part of the same discussion in 2016-15, and you will recall that we fought very hard to get the roundabout to be built before the actual estate was built. Now, we won that one. My discussions, I'm waiting for them to come back with the written response. I would apologise if it's slightly different when the written response comes back. But the but the 278 works are an area of works within the section, the development section 1 agreement, section 106 agreements. The road adjacent to the development is going to be resurfaced and it's going to be done. But the section 278 works don't go beyond the width of the development. It's very unusual for a development to do that. I've asked all those questions you've asked, and I said, well, why can't you do that? Well, because the developer would not fund something which was outside their development. Now, which you are right, which brings the question that should we have early enough conversations? We won the right to get the railway walkthrough. We've also, I did mention in our conversation earlier today that also one of the elements is the footway which goes through St Rumbold, which goes to the railway, which is very important that footpath goes in to actually give connectivity for young people out of that state. So bringing it back to the 20/30 discussions, and a long discussion about that, they were not, as I say, they wouldn't commit on it, and were slightly more, how do I put it, challenging around the legalities of the 30 down the Tingett Road in my discussions with them. Now, the order and the information of the consultation, I presume, will be sent directly to the council on the 20 mile hour. There was a brief conversation the preceding week between the cabinet member and Councillor Neil. I don't think that would have been the conversation which changed the traffic order and put this into the consultation. I don't think that the traffic orders would take a long time to be drafted. What I am aware of is that both South, Mark Cole, and many members of this committee, Anthony, here we are, strongly asking for the 30 mile an hour speed limit to be down the Tingett Road. What I am aware of is that when the development was first cited, it was mentioned from us at that point to them that we wanted a 30 on the Tingett Road. So I think to anyone to say that we've got it at this point would be, as you quite rightly say, John, is erroneous, because this has to go for a public consultation, and any one person could challenge the principles of that 30 mile an hour limit at this stage. So while we may celebrate it appearing on paperwork, what we can't do is say that it's going to go through, because there may be all these other legal reasons, and the very things that we say will challenge it. So it's unfortunate that it's come out as it was, because I had cited it in a fairly responsible way to the officers of the council, who then thought we'd bring it forward at a later meeting when we could discuss it in a more frank and proper way. So I am pleased that the town council's representations, and I should imagine the Buckingham side made similar representations, have been heard, because that's the only way that this could have got onto that proposal. There is another proposal on there in Buckingham, but I think we need to sort of hold our breath a little bit and hopefully respond to the consultation with the correct information that they're looking for, while being aware that other people might not be so enthused. Now, the 20 mile an hour area of it, John, I did talk to them about that, and that 20 mile an hour thing, the answer you generally get is, oh, well, that's been looked at elsewhere, so and so. Although I did meet the developers in a separate meeting, and they assured me that their developers are very in favour of 20 mile an hour limits on their development. So that element, we have to separate the two things. That is not in any paperwork that I've seen. I'd love to say it was, but it isn't. So I think you're right, Councillor Harvey, to be very, very cautious about this actually happening, and to over-egg it is unfortunate, because if it doesn't happen, we all look really, really, really silly. So I'd go as far as saying I support it enthusiastically as the local member of Buckinghamshire Council, and I support it as a town council because I support all of you. But I am really concerned that that's it's not copper bottom, is it? And And just an announcement on social media that it looks like we've got it isn't actually the same as having it. So,
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. In fact, the next item on the agenda is to discuss, or it's to receive and discuss the response from the Cabinet member on Section 106 consultations. My suggestion would be that when we meet on November the 1st, we ally the two, the speed limit together with street lighting and Section 106 agreements with street lighting at that meeting when we have a proper debate about it. Councillor Harvey?
But back to the action, is there still something for me, Robert and Catherine to be doing on this?
no.
Because that's at the moment still another ticked action on the list.
I would think not for the time being, because we've got this consultation in front of us. I think perhaps we ought to publicise the consultation through our usual means and let people of the town know that this is proposed, because I think a wave of pluses might defeat a few minuses.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Ma'am, Councillor Gay.
Thank you. Can I just ask a couple of questions? Assuming that there is public support for the reduction of the speed limit, how soon could we expect that to be implemented?
Well, the consultation doesn't end until the 8th of November.
So
I'm not sure thereafter how fast it could be. We might be lucky if it's a 6-week thing, could have it by Christmas.
right, because what the other question is, clearly the street lighting issue is separate from that. However, given recent events and concerns nationally about the safety of women, particularly on our streets in the dark, I do wonder whether this should be something that's taken forward as an emergency in relation to street lighting. There are a lot of people who've moved into that new housing development, potentially a lot of people who would like to be walking between that development and the town centre in the dark, who maybe would then use their cars, which goes all against our climate emergency plan. And there may be people living on there who don't have access to a car and who would really love to be able to walk. It's a pleasant walk along that street, but not a pleasant walk for a woman in the dark.
Yeah.
And I think it is something that we should be taking forward as a matter of urgency.
Thank you. There's also, of course, the
Children.
nursery, the Fieldhouse Nursery,
Yeah.
which young children go to.
Children
from the
walking
estate.
to and from school as well.
And it will be dark.
With the lights drawing in.
Councillor Stutch, there's something you want to add, because you've had 5 minutes earlier. Which
I'd just say that the Mayor raises a very important point. I would suggest that we do a twofold press release. I think the Councillor Cole leads on the 30 mile an hour, and the Mayor leads on the elements which are outstanding, which is the lack of lighting, and that way it's better. It's a twofold approach, and the rest of us can join in with our general support around those things.
I'd be happy to do that if the Mayor would.
You'd be happy with that.
Be happy to issue a press release. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
I would lead on the speed limit and you would lead on the lighting.
Okay.
Around what we know in detail, correct, not what we would like.
Yeah. Are members in agreement with that? If we did that, thank you. Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Councillor Harvey and Councillor Stutchbury, for your input on that. Anything else on the action report? Without Councillor White being here, we can't really see one word. As I say, the one thing that is of great concern to us is Oddfellows Hall. Unauthorised work, which is supposedly suspended at the moment, but it is suspected work is continuing, and a lot of residents are being affected by this.
Thank you. Just because you mentioned Councillor White then, and something that was said in our earlier briefing meeting, I know all councillors receive copies of all minutes, but has Councillor White been specifically alerted about these action points?
Back when they were first went on the action list, yes. I don't keep looking,
Yeah, that was May or June. It's been a long time, yes.
but yes, I think we could
Prompt him, thank you. Right, nothing else on action reports. Okay, planning applications, not too many tonight, but if we start with the first one, 20 Greenway Walk. This is the, sorry, what have I jumped?
5.2.
Sorry.
5.2.
I thought we'd done that.
To receive and discuss the cabinet members' response.
Right, sorry, I thought that's what we were going to throw into the
It's the November meeting.
the November meeting, but if members want to discuss it tonight. Paul wrote to Gareth Williams, who's the cabinet member for planning and regeneration, saying we're not getting enough advance notice or advanced consultation in section 106 agreements, and it was a rather woolly reply we got back from the cabinet member.
And it was in direct opposition to the similar question asked by Mentor Norton.
Yeah, and he did note that we've clearly been engaged with the Walnut Drive application. The comments you and others have made will be considered by the council before finalising the agreement. But Paul actually drew attention to a huge number of errors in the document which concern Buckingham, and I know that Carolyn and the Maids Morton Action Group have similar concerns. So
the response they got was, after taking advice and in light of the comments received, I remain content that the draft legal agreement is both appropriate and secures the necessary obligations as required by the council, which is directly opposite to what he said.
yeah.
I am wondering whether he didn't read the attachments, because he hasn't even commented that all right, we'll sort the spelling out. But I mean, I have asked the officer if there are any of the maps which should be attached to the agreement, because the maps of the highway obligations should be available soon. And that might tell us where this stupid cycle path and crossing of the Stratford Road is supposed to go, which is, it's a duplicate of what, we've got a perfectly adequate cycle network at the moment and a perfectly adequate crossing at the top of the Stratford Road where the lollipop lady is. And if you're coming from Walnut Drive, the obvious way is to come down through Page Hill to the lay-by and cross into Linden Village there to get to the schools. And it couldn't be safer going through the park. We've got no roads to cross until you get to Walton Road and then Linden Road. And I don't know, as for the fact that they can't tell the difference between Stratford Road and High Street, so they think the buses come out of Stratford Road.
Stratford.
Oh, well, Stratford, exactly, but I mean, that's what I mean about the spelling mistake. We pointed that out 3 times. But to give opposite answers, rather, sorry if I'm in public, but it looks as though I hadn't actually thought it through or doesn't understand the problem.
Thank you. Councillor Touch with them.
I think we say that you perhaps have an off day, and
It
perhaps
took him from July to answer the letter.
an off period then. And so I think what we need to do, there's 2 elements around this, which I think, if I've got this wrong, is one is the element around the Walnut Drive, the other one is the principle per se about being involved in section 106. They're 2 very, very different questions. One is long lasting, the ability for the town council to be in section 106. The Walnut Drive thing, I think he's given us a legalistic answer, because that's probably the position that he won't comment wider, but we need to go back on that and ask him in detail around the spelling and detail around the route. I think we need to do that. Though we did move a little bit more forward through for council when we agreed the town clerk to have the right to go and look at a similar application in a similar area, which is now being agreed through the Vale Plan. So we're moving our goalposts nicely, but if we don't get involved in section 106, pardon the earlier discussion that Councillor Harvey cited about and the mayor is going to be doing press release, it means that those very things that local councillors know very well about, which is that there's going to be a gap in the street lighting and how do we look at that, won't get picked up. And that cannot be fiscally very clever, because anything that doesn't get picked up by the developer gets picked up by the ratepayer. And I think these sort of questions about the responsibility and the financial drag of not having to include best knowledge into a decision is going to cost the council a lot of money in the long run, because if we repeat these problems, who's going to have to fund it? The general pot of council tax, of which there's very little money in there for high growth periods. So I think that's my view. I mean, others might disagree with me, but I think that's, you know, that mention the money, because the money is what matters.
We did raise the point that something that is either irrelevant, inappropriate, or simply cannot be implemented because the terms of the agreement are just so bizarre that you can't possibly do it, like Morton Road's requirement for a pedestrian crossing across Mains Morton Avenue. Yes, Margaret, don't worry about it. They meant Avenue Road, but if we'd seen the thing beforehand, we'd have known that. It means the community misses out because the developer doesn't have to implement something that's impossible. But that money could have been used for something that was more useful.
Yes.
And we made that point. He's ignored it.
If I could come back, perhaps we
Councillor Hardy's been waiting now. So Councillor Hardy.
I don't know what to say, really. I mean, because it's just so frustrating. Because we're an asset, we're not an irritant, we're not a liability. We're here trying to do the best for our town. And it seems to me that the Buckinghamshire Council officers and sometimes members just seem to frustrate our ability to do that. And it's, for me, just so blindingly obvious that if we were involved at the beginning of Section 106 negotiations, many of the problems that Catherine can list, probably in her sleep, would just not happen. And I'm just exasperated that they seem to be unable or unwilling to listen to that very, very simple point. And I don't know what else we can do to kind of get the message across. I mean, Paul's letter to this chap was extremely detailed, and it's just one of the ducks back. So I haven't got anything positive to offer other than just.
Well, may I suggest that this committee asks the town clerk to respectfully write back to the cabinet member and ask if he would answer the questions he raised in his letter of July.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I don't know what else we could do.
Yeah, let's do that.
Would members be in agreement with that, John?
Yeah,
we do need to define the two areas. The long-term area, Chairman, which is the negotiation to be involved in Section 106, and the Walnut Drive area. They are very much linked, but they are separate.
Yeah, separate
Yeah,
issues.
yeah.
Do people, members agree?
Yeah,
with that?
agree.
I think we could brief Paul on that.
Yeah.
If everyone's happy with that, we can move on. Thank you very much, everyone. Planning applications. So 20 Greenway Walk, we mentioned, this is a householder application for the erection of a side porch. We've seen Catherine's notes on this.
No objections from me.
Just getting up. Is everyone happy with that?
Abstain.
Thank you.
Can you just advise our abstain?
We take it anyway.
That's a given. So I'm just getting up the planning applications.
It's worth putting it on each recording there.
Yeah.
But thank you, Martin. You're my back.
Yeah, as Catherine pointed out, it's there's good separation of both porch from neighbours, and so everyone's happy with that. Thank you. Item 2 is 40 March Edge. This is a householder application for the replacement of a single-storey rear conservatory. The current one is a flat roof conservatory. This would be a pitched roof conservatory, which has always been our planning preference. Carolyn, I wonder, Buckingham Society?
No, we're quite happy with this. No objections.
Thank you. Councillor Hardy?
Could we ask that the householder considers making part of the roof a solar panel?
Are they see-through solar panels?
No.
So it's the conservatory, it's a bit difficult to.
People don't want glass roofs on their conservatories anymore anyway, it's too blooming hot.
Too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter.
Exactly, so it'd probably be not a see-through roof anyway.
I have to say that it is shown as a glass roof.
Really?
Yeah, that's why I read it.
Well, can we still ask them? I think we're going to keep asking every application that comes in, have you thought about solar? Have you thought about solar? It'll get very boring, but a bit like Robin always saying, every meeting, of course, that he's going to abstain. I'm going to keep saying, have you thought about solar?
How do members feel? Is that appropriate for us to ask?
Nothing to lose.
I mean, they might say
Nothing to
it's
lose.
silly, and that's fine, but
Okay.
we keep saying that.
Let's start the
Eventually you
rolling.
get through.
Let's start it rolling.
Yeah.
Thank you. Everyone happy? Okay, the third one, this is 15 Market Square. It's a double application. It's a display of non-illuminated fascia sign fronting Market Square. It's retrospective. Work has already been done. It's black lettering on a yellow background. The sign is not internally illuminated. But one thing that Councillor Ralph drew our attention to is in the photograph, there's a lot of wiring hanging there and what looks like neon lights above the porch. Councillor Ralph, do you want to?
Yes, I actually took some photographs of this quite separately, this application a week or two ago, and I noticed the strip along above where the black part is above the yellow sign, and then I saw the cable hanging, and it isn't just sort of like old cable, it's classic second fix or ready for second fix looped bedding. I thought, I wonder if that's going to be attached, and if it's going to be attached to an electrical supply, golly gosh, it could be light, and therefore, are we going to have a strip of light along illuminating the yellow sign? And I thought I'd bring it up during this meeting.
It looks like there's something there already.
Of course, there's nothing wrong with illuminating the sign as long as it's not internally illuminated. That's our
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So it may be that it's going to be an external one shining down onto the yellow sign. I don't know.
Was there anything in the application about illuminating the sign?
There isn't, and I think that for that reason we will comment about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
agreed.
Apart from that, I have to say it's nice to see something a bit different in the high street.
Yeah.
An example of the mixture that you can have in a nice high street.
Carol.
Yeah. I totally agree with that, so as we did at our meeting, but we just wanted to point out that retrospective application again in a conservation area, it is really imperative, we think, that permission should be sought for new signage within a conservation area on a listed building before they go ahead with it. And it's a great pity that the fee for retrospective, I believe, is not increased. And it should be tripled.
The enforcement notice was caused by Councillor Harvey's evil eyes. The enforcement case was caused by Councillor Harvey.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Very good, very good.
And what you're saying, Karen, is absolutely right, because a retrospective application involves a lot more work, more costs for everybody involved, and yet, as you say, it's still the same fee as if you're a householder applying for the first
And
time.
there is that, people do get away with things. When it's retrospective, they might.
Councillor Harvey?
Well, should I suggest that we write to our MP, suggesting that there ought to be a change in the law, because obviously this would be something that would require probably primary legislation or at least secondary legislation from the minister to make this the case, because we can highlight the reasons why it's important and really act as a kind of a bit of a deterrent to people who think they can just slide by.
I think we do need to make that as a proposal for another meeting where it could be on the agenda and we can discuss it. It's not something that we as a committee tonight I don't think can actually.
Yes, why not? We're almost.
We could, I don't know, I think we'd be allowed.
I stand to be corrected.
We're only missing one councillor. We've got a majority of this. If you want to take a vote.
Right. Well, if you'd like to make a proposal, then
I
Councillor Harvey.
propose we write to our MP suggesting there should be a change in the legislation to allow councils, if they choose, to charge an extra fee for late retrospective planning application.
Right, second, Councillor Reynolds. You also like to speak on it?
First, put out a paragraph saying it's supported by the Buckingham Society.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Supported by the Buckingham Society. Councillor Stutchbury.
I'm not going to comment on it, Chairman, because we're in a discussion of an application, and so I can't comment on it. I will write my own correspondence to somebody and ask my own questions, but not in a general term, listening to the debate. I'm not going to comment on the application because I'll fall trick of actually commenting on the plan application.
Okay, that's fine.
So you understand why I do.
Yes, okay.
It's interesting times, isn't it? We're now on our third Housing Communities Minister in about 2 years. It was James Brokenshire, who very sadly died last week.
Yes.
Then replaced by Robert Jenrick, who got kicked out of the cabinet a few weeks ago, and I forget who the new one is now, but it is a revolving doors, isn't it?
Isn't that Michael Gove?
Oh, yes, it might go.
Can I propose that maybe that was a recorded vote, that would mean that I can abstain.
Okay, well, is everyone happy to make a recorded vote? Yeah, so that Councillor Stanley can be named.
So we've got John Von Go.
You all know what the motion was. So all those in favour, we write to the MP. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, I'm 7. And anyone against? Abstentions? One abstention. Thank you very much. That's carried. Thank you for that, Councillor Harvey. Moving on then, still in the same area, 23 Market Hill, change of use of financial services. It does mention in the planning application, it was a new shop front. That is now withdrawn. It's not a new shop front. They're not proposing to do that.
Yes, they are, but they're proposing to do it as a signage application.
As a signage application,
Which
right?
we should have by next meeting.
Okay. So all we're dealing with at the moment is the change of use from financial service to a nail shop, installation of ventilation. There is apparently a small inner courtyard, so that can be done away from public waste. There's no waste disposal shown at the moment, but they do have a purple bin. Councillor Ralph.
The ventilation, could we note that we are assuming at this point that it will be venting out into the interior courtyard and not out into the street?
Thank you.
Just a question. Are they replacing, is this a new nail shop or is it the moving from the old one opposite the gym to the new?
So far as I'm aware, it's a new nail shop. It's a Vietnamese forename and a Polish surname.
From Northampton.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I personally will not be patronising. I don't know how they'll get on with their new neighbours, who might want decisions of, facial types. So.
Once again, as the mayor reminded us at our meeting this afternoon, it's another business, which is good for planning.
Yeah.
Things are moving.
They will be doing screws and staple guns as well.
Fine, thank you everyone for that.
Was it worth the trip?
The following two can be considered together because one of them is a listed application. That's Rose Cottage in Washington Road. This is Dr. George Gabriel's house. It's a Grade 2 listed farmhouse, 17th, 18th century, once called Chapel Farm, now called Rose Cottage. And what it is, it's just purely alterations at the back for a single story extension, which will not be seen anywhere from the road. It might be seen from horseback by anyone passing by, but Carolyn, Buckingham Society.
Personally, very, very, very well. But we had no objections to this. We thought it was actually quite a sensitive use of the extension. And as you say, it's not visible from the roadside, which is the main principal reason it's listed.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
I was going to say no objections from me, as long as the historical buildings officer's happy with it.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's obviously a listed building and everything else, so it is a notable listed building on that.
Right. I mean, yes, Catherine will append the usual, subject to historic building officers.
Okay.
Agreement. Yeah. Thank you very much for that, everyone. Item 8 is 37 Wells Street. It is a householder application for a single story and 2-story rear extension and pedestrian gate. This is at the top of Wells Street, where it comes up just below the church. It's the last house there. It's in the conservation area. It's not listed, but it is a building of note, has listed neighbours. And yes, Councillor Hardy.
Well, I'm not entirely sure, and forgive me if I've not picked it up from the your documentation, Catherine, as to whether actually they're going to be losing a car parking space or not. And even if they are or are not, they are putting in, I think, an extra bedroom. And therefore, what does that say about the validity of the application, or is it regarded as being town centre, in which case car parking does not apply?
Catherine?
They're extending a bedroom, they're not making a new one. And their parking space is beside the house. You can see on the picture on page 11 that there is a car in it and room for one beside it.
Oh, right, okay, fine. No objections.
Thank you for that. Karen, Buckingham Society.
Yes. Firstly, we're slightly mystified by the new window that is going into beside the extension, and don't really see why that wall is being pierced to produce a new window that overlooks sort of utility roof. So that was one point. I don't know if anyone else spotted this, because it didn't seem to serve any purpose. It's certainly got a new window on the plan.
Oh yeah,
And
it's actually marked new windows,
Yes.
a triangular one. Yeah.
and it serves no purpose to our eyes, and it would obviously be another insert into what is existing, presumably 17th century wall there. But actually what we really question and would like to object to is the pedestrian gate within the boundary wall. Again, it seems rather odd that we want to open up a rather insecure access into the back of the house there. But B, it is a continuous wall, and it seems to us to rather spoil the street scene and the character of the street.
Thank you. You probably all noted Catherine's comments as well about the lamppost, which we can't tell if it's active or not. If it has a head.
Yeah,
indeed.
certainly if they want a pedestrian gate and is approved,
Yeah, exactly.
it should not be in the position of that it's currently shown on the
Yeah,
plan.
a mature holly tree.
Yeah. You would not wish to lose that holly.
Well, having heard Buckingham Society's views, what do members feel? We have concerns about the new window, Councillor Try.
Unfortunately, we've got to consider this as a whole application, not just the gate, not just the window, not just the extension. So if there's one item that we don't like, do we say that we refuse the whole application unless they are like-minded to amend the plans according to our notes?
We have done that on occasion. We say that we oppose, but members might be minded to change their opinion if.
And is that still a valid way forward in this
It seems to
current
work.
climate? It seems to work, and that's good enough.
Let's take it in order then. The new window. People are against. For or against.
Must be a reason they want more light, I guess.
Yeah, I was trying to look at the plans carefully. I wonder if they're just trying to introduce a bit more light.
Yeah.
Because
Windows are good things. Windows bring in daylight, which means less electricity being used. That's a good thing.
Okay, thank you. So
And that code.
So we, as a committee, don't have a problem with that, but the probably the more serious point is the breaking into an old wall, which is, remember, they said that would be replaced, the gates would have brick piers which would be rendered.
Chair, can they get access to the back garden at the moment? Would they have to go through their house together?
I don't know.
they'd have to go through the back of their parking bay.
But if they want to say get some, I don't know, some soil delivered, there's a way from the street into their garden that doesn't go through the house, that they could take with a wheelbarrow.
Yeah, where the parking bay is.
So I don't see the point.
Well, we
Gate, I
it's in our
can't
power
see the
to
gate.
object to the wall being broken, to
Yeah,
put a gateway in, so particularly if it's in the conservation area.
well, if it's their wall, It's part of the historic building, the listed building that we don't agree with.
It's not a listed building, this is the point. It is not listed. They can do a
All right.
lot more to it than it was
It's in
listed.
the conservation area, that's all it is.
It is a building note,
Yeah.
Yes, but that's primary because it's a corner building.
but it's in the conservation area, it's got listed neighbours, which again has an impact on it, so we're quite entitled.
I think we should object.
I don't have an objection.
Yeah, I agree with what Karen said.
Okay, but we won't mention the window, but we will, as Catherine says, that we might be minded to change our minds if the plans for the gateway are dropped.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Right, these three are not for consultation because two of them are certificates of lawfulness. Doesn't mean to say we can't have a say on them, but the first one is Portfield Way. As you can see, they want to put a single-storey road extension and convert the garage. The main thing is with him, John, is parking, and they've got plenty of parking out front, as you can see from Catherine's photo, probably enough for 3 cars.
Just ask a question, because we didn't object to this extension in any shape or form, but it seems quite a major proposal for this house, and obviously going to affect the neighbours. Why a certificate of lawfulness and not for consultation? Seemingly, as much a change to the property as Greenway Walks bought.
Yes, I'm not sure whether it's because they didn't fully implement their previous approval.
The only reason I can think of
I've never been sure about certificates of lawfulness. I've always looked on them as a retrospective thing, like squatters' rights. If you did an extension and nobody noticed for 4 years, you can keep it. But you can get a certificate of lawfulness so it doesn't upset your solicitors when you want to throw it for the house. But this is beforehand, and I really have never understood ACLs as before the fact.
Exactly. Well, that's what was our query.
So is everyone happy with that proposal?
Yeah.
Thank you. The next one again, certificate of lawfulness. This is 15 Bernardine's Way. This is an old chestnut that's come back again. We had quite a lot of discussion over this back in 2017 when they wanted to put dormers on the rear and their parking issues. It was finally approved. It's now come back and they want to put...
Well, they didn't implement the previous approval.
No.
So it's timed out.
It's now timed out.
And they want to fiddle around with the size of the dormers as well and have them on the front roof. So.
Right, and there'll be box dormers rather than gable dormers, and the skylights on the back now, I think. Yeah. There is sufficient parking. Councillor Tribe.
Hang on, then we just spoke about ACLs, but this is a change because we're now having Nicky Verdi, aren't we? We're having the box ones at the front and dormers at the back.
I think the description is wrong, and I've challenged this with the officer, and she hasn't come back to me yet. But the previous application, the approved one, had dormers at the front.
Yes.
But they were narrower like that. And
Yeah.
they're not gabled, they are both box dormers. But the new description has come in with the dormers on the wrong side. And so much of this application is a duplicate of the approved one. If it had happened 2 years ago, they would have put it through as an amended plan or a variation. But they have timed out on it, and I think it's a different applicant. So obviously he's picked up the drawings from the previous to do. And what we've got now, you see, you've got wider, squarer box dormers than the little narrow ones that they've got approved.
This sounds like a great loophole to jump through, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, this will affect the street scene a lot more.
Probably.
Karen.
No, we agree with that.
Yeah.
We seem to recall that the previous application actually had some sort of extension in the front. There was a huge argument with their neighbour whose light was going to be
That's right, yeah.
So that's gone.
Yes.
And it is just the conversion
Yes,
of the
there
lot.
still is no increase in available parking. A forecourt.
I thought the extension was at the back, and the neighbour said it's going to take all her line to know.
Nevertheless, there is no extension.
It never happened, yeah. I think from what Catherine's saying, we really need further clarification before we can take a discussion.
Totally agree.
But because of confusing paperwork, everyone happy with that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Then finally, 3A Lember Road. This is slightly different. This is for an HPDE, selection of a single story rear extension. So Catherine was trying to look into today what exactly this involved, because it would seem that the permitted development rights have expired on this property, but
No. I mean, Carol will remember the Pickles extensions. I developed a shorthand in the ledger for these. We were just drawing sideways arrows in the dimension and the upward arrow in the dimension, because the law actually said within so many metres wide, within so many metres high at the eaves and at the wall. And basically it got rubber stamped if you were within the permitted dimensions. But that was a scheme that only lasted till 2019.
Right.
So I queried it.
Your memory is better than mine.
My lovely son once said, "Long like elephant, memory to match." I do love my
Moving on.
Right, and the answer I got back, and you will see whether it answers the question or not. An HPDE application is a time expired scheme, and if it is not determined or an extension of time agreed by the determination date, then the applicant can go forward with the development. She thought. The application is not due for determination until 3rd of November and will be evaluated prior to this date. It didn't answer the question I asked, which is, if it's an expired scheme, why is it in front of me?
Right.
So we'll give it another go.
Give it another go.
Give it another go.
Yeah.
right. So back to them with that one. Thank you very much. Right, tree applications, 3 here. The first one Church Street, the fellow 5 conifer trees. We had 100% against this from Brian, who was emailed. Carolyn, perhaps you might tell us what Buckingham Society's view is on this.
I think the Society's view on this was beautifully put by Michael Hunt, is that they are actually in good condition, who's able to identify the type of conifer, which I'm not good at. They serve quite a strong purpose, not only from the ecological point of view, with carbon capture and all that, but also as a screen and as a statement within the church. There's no reason to tell them other than, I don't know, someone doesn't like them.
Yes, well, because trees are a very short turnaround, I've already sent back a collated response on that that says we oppose this because they are of amenity value in the landscape, and they don't have to give a reason for ATC applications anyway. But I said, I looked at the reasons you can refuse one, and one of them is amenity value. And on the top crest of the hill, and with the churches surrounded them.
Yeah.
And I'm indebted to Councillor Stutchby for reminding us that the Buckingham Town Council does own that strip of land as well on the edge of the churchyard. So we are the immediate.
But these are within the garden.
Yeah, but we are the immediate neighbour to that wall. So we have replied.
Okay.
Just a sort of little question to follow up on that. I mean, it's clear that all trees are of value in terms of their carbon absorption, and therefore positive element towards climate change, net zero and all that. Is that something that we can add to comments on trees? Unless they're diseased, and there's a really good reason, we have to strive to keep them.
We can try. Shire do have a tree policy which echoes all of that. They just don't seem to know that they've got it.
Right.
But with ATCs, it's effectively a notification of works, and if they don't want to TPO the tree because it's not of sufficient quality or they just can't be bothered, they just rubber stamp it. That's what they can do. If it's a protected tree, they have to. It's a longer consultation time, and they have to go into it a bit more thoroughly. They have to have reasons, for example. They have to have dimensions. If it's a crown thin, how high and what percentage, and that sort of thing. And I'm so glad that we've got Ian Hopcraft on the tree warden on this.
Yes.
So we're given no reason for this at all.
No, but it's an ATC.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they don't have to say it's diseased, their roots are under. No, there's just no reason we need to give.
Karen makes a good point because, of course, we did declare a
This
climate
is why
emergency.
we wanted Neil Pascal to come to a meeting and sort of explain exactly what county's policy is with
What we
trees.
can and can't do. Yeah.
I mean, the one with the yew trees in, the trees down the side of Burnley Close
Very close, yes.
are being hacked about something terrible at the moment.
I've not seen the proof.
No, I haven't seen an approval of it either. But as an ATC, it will probably have time expired and they can basically get on with it. But I have asked twice why they're allowed to do that without, and they're not even on the site. They are on Burnley Close. They are county's own trees. And I have found that, far from unification being the wonderful thing that was sold to us, AVDC tree officers are still only dealing with old AVDC trees, and county tree officers are dealing with county trees, and the twain do not meet.
They need to branch out, don't they?
Councillor Hart.
So ATC stands for automatic tree chop.
Well done.
You ought to put that one back.
Thank you very much. Anyway, planning decisions on the next page. You'll notice 4 refusals. Autumnville, Alderley, Hammer Plants is. Sorry.
We've still got some more trees to do.
Yes,
Yes,
both
14.
the other trees I had a unanimous, there's no problem with this, and they've gone as.
Yeah, sorry, I thought I did say that at the start.
All right, okay, fine.
Thank you. All maintenance. Yeah, so planning decisions, 4 refusals, Autumnville, Border Lane, Hammer Plants and Botolph Mews, 2 of them which we had opposed.
Yeah.
And Home Appliance, sorry,
I
Karen.
looked up all the reasons for these refusals, particularly on Catherine's recommendation on Market Hill, which was a really good reading. But I also discovered that Botolph Mews didn't get approval.
So I didn't quite get that.
9 Botolph Mews, when I looked at on the portal, appeared to be approved, not refused.
No.
Did I get that wrong? I know I've been on leave, but I apologise for that. Yes, because I came back from leave and I had to produce an agenda the same day.
Right, so that's okay. Approved.
You found one mistake in her 25 years of work.
It
I
was,
was just thinking to see why.
I will publish an amendment to that.
Right, thank you. So it's 3 refusals. Yes, and as Catherine says, and as Caroline just reminded us, the officer's report for Home Appliances is well worth reading. And Sheena, I don't know if you've seen that yet, but the officer's report for refusing the
Yes.
former telephone exchange is a lot of that stuff we can carry into the new neighbourhood plan, because she has the whole way through her reasons and reports that used the Buckingham Neighbourhood Plan as her reasons, and it's very encouraging to see that.
It was a very good report using all the available policies to her, including the neighbourhood plan. And yet again, our little unassuming one about adequate outdoor private space has made another sort of headline billing. I always smile when I see that one coming up and being used. It's obviously been one of the really successful policies.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. It must be very gratifying when you see your plan being used like that, Sheena. Yeah, thank you. Martin.
Just quickly, do we happen to know the officer who, just off, hang on,
Someone was it?
I didn't recognise the name. Rebecca someone?
Can we send her a lot?
The approval is signed by Steve Banbury, but it might be Danica. But
No, I think-
I don't think she signs her report. But no, I can find that out. But no, it's very pleasing when you've done a sort of full page of "we hated this." We get quoted in the officer's report verbatim.
Right. Moving on down then, the appeal decisions. You're all aware now that the Verney Close surgery and the North End surgery were both turned down for development. The inspector, again, relying on the Buckingham Neighbourhood Plan to say these are community assets. And that was his main reason. He said there were a number of other reasons that he didn't need to go into because the overriding one was the Buckingham Neighbourhood Plan. So what will happen to those bills, you don't know. Coming up for appeal is the garage site at Pipel Crescent that was, has not been determined by Buckinghamshire Council and is coming up for appeal on the 2nd of November 2021. We strongly opposed it, which is part of the reason that it was refused. Is there anything members would like to add to our original reasons, or are we happy just that Catherine put this?
We've already sent
We sent our reasons already.
1, 2, 3, 4 responses,
Right.
main and 3 amended, and we were still opposing it with no change on the 3rd amendment.
If we were very, very lucky, we might get the same inspector.
We've still not got them to agree that the trees at the back are actually trees and not scrubland.
There it is. Thank you everyone for that. Item 8, Buckinghamshire Council Matters, to receive the Buckinghamshire Council new documents and other information from Buckinghamshire Council members present. Councillor Touchby, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Earlier I said about Article 4. The question from Councillor Alison, my colleague, Wheelhouse, is actually published today, which is on Article 4, and I note that it's made the agenda in the sense that it's on the Cabinet's agenda for updates. So it might be something updated on the agenda from action updates. And so it's agenda item. Well, it's the one after questions.
Capable of finding it.
Yeah. So there's something there. It brought, but so it has moved very fast since Alison raised the question about it. The other thing is on Buckinghamshire Council. Didn't discuss it at council. I didn't think it was great because it wasn't planning particularly. Obviously, I didn't vote to agree the Vale plan because it was abstained because of its overwhelming veracity against the Buckingham Neighbourhood Plan, which we'd all worked on endlessly. That vote was, and also it challenged the Mays Morton issue, which we've discussed about the fact that by voting for the plan, you would effectively be voting for the Mays Morton development, of which I couldn't see that I could do that because I'd listened hard to all the comments made, and it seemed like you would give it legal legs. So I couldn't see that. So I abstained. So other members abstained who had those feelings. Unfortunately, it wasn't many members who abstained. On the elements around the, as I said, the Vale plan stroke, the affordability, the question, response to the question is in the minutes of the meeting of the Cabinet published today. So I think that'd be something which I won't discuss, but I think it was very much follows the chairman's deliberations about these matters through the clerk, but that we felt that we've got the protection for the affordability in our neighbourhood plan at present in the present neighbourhood plan. But I think it's worth members having that to read through and then discussing it again at a later stage rather than do it now. And so we are sort of on planning terms in a new world with the Vale plan. And it's interesting looking at the comments made about their understanding of what they think they can do as affordable. But I think let's have that as an agenda item so that it can be discussed rather than just me talk about it. But as for Buckinghamshire Council, I should be tripping off to the Fire Authority on Wednesday to discuss the latest proposals around future looking at what possible purpose the Police and Crime Commission could play in fire authorities. And yes, you may wonder. But anyway, so that's a different matter. But I've also given numerous other things. But as it's only a planning meeting, I shan't go into those details, just stick on the planning elements. But I was, I will say in passing, I was shocked at the council meeting how many people. It's only when you listen to the debate you realise that a plan which is so local, the Vale plan was so local. How many members who had heard the debate from many good people about the problems of the plan, then chose to support it or speak favourably of it. The webcast is there. I don't need to. If you want to drip through the webcast, you can see who said what. It's public document. What I said. You can imagine I was only allowed 2 minutes, so I managed 2 minutes. But then give me an hour. I managed an hour. I don't know, got 2
I
minutes.
have watched the meeting and I have got notes.
So that's where we are. But thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Robin. Any questions about that, Robin? No, thank you. So the next item again, Robin, the written response from the Cabinet member to your question about the archaeological remains at West End Farm. Have we got any more news on that?
Just to say that I felt that there was an action within it for us per se, and in the sense that my question was your question, in the sense that I was operating about concerns expressed around this chamber, both in council and planning. I think we need to go back and if you read the response, it's quite a good response, to be honest. It says everything that we knew. The thing that it does say in the written response is that Briar Homes have withdrawn their application, which is quite a statement in itself, and that's in the public domain now, so that must be correct. That means they have no notable interest in that site, in that application. Whether they've got interest in the site, I don't know. But I do think that because this is such a major archaeological site in Buckingham, as it will predict what we know about our past history going forward, be they Iron Age, Anglo-Saxon, or possibly spreading the whole of the medieval period through into Civil War. So I think we should write to them and ask them how they reckon they're going to pursue it, because the question was posed in the meeting that we need to establish what the costs of producing the report was. Now, what was pleasing was that was both then strengthened by the leader of the council, Councillor Martin Tett, and I was grateful for his intervention, where he said we need to establish this because I think his word was something along the lines of it's such important, we need to actually look at resources to be able to do it. I think it's reasonable because there's been a gap, but the council in its own right, the town council, asked the question, has there been any progress? Has the cost been established for this? Because clearly the archaeology people who've done this work, it would appear from the response, have not been paid. Well, you cannot work for nothing, and we shouldn't in any way criticise them, but it does say that there's 80 odd bodies, 70 to 80 bodies, or there's 80, and some with their hands tied behind their back. This is going to define the medieval history of Buckingham. We were a frontier town, and I should imagine that this was on the flats in Marlow, close to London, it would be attracting attention. So, because of the council's interest in it, I raised the question. It's there. I hope that's agreeable for you, Chairman, that we write something along that. Right. I mean, I'll take any questions on it, but I am going to write my own questions. But I'm leaving a gap because of time to find information.
I did read that Martin Tett said they might attempt to fund this from resources.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I thought he said, and that's what I was alluding to. But maybe he said it in a public meeting, so he must believe it. So to say that, he must be strongly believing that's what should happen.
Thank you.
But I think that's something we could take up.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, I think it's good that the leader of the council, Buckinghamshire Council, has suggested that there might be resources to at least pay off the archaeologists for the work that they've done and produce the report. I'm wondering whether we as a town council, with what we know so far, might just alert English Heritage as to this site and see what interest they might have.
Yeah.
So
Would they not know already?
Well, we don't know.
Yeah.
I propose that we write to English Heritage and bring this matter to their attention and say matters are in hand, but you may be interested to know this. What are your thoughts about taking this forward? Just begin to sort of stir the pond a little bit there.
Yeah, no, as Robin said, it's an important site. We're with the frontier of Danelaw, weren't we? Watling Street was considered to be the actual line, but there were a lot of incursions coming in.
They are talking about, through the chairman, they are talking about this in America. So it made a Smithsonian magazine first time round, and people in America were following it because I had a gentleman email me and said, "You are a Stutchbury, are we related?" It's rather nice because I can send in some information back. So the Stutchburys are in America, just to let you know. And we did work for the Washingtons, so that's why we were in America.
Okay, good. But can we write to English Heritage?
I think that's great. Is everyone happy with that?
Yes,
very much. Thank you very much, Robin, for those.
Wondering if Councillor Stutchbury recommended we write to Mr. Tet or Mr. Williams.
I was because it's nice to give them both opportunity to comment.
Well, we write to one and copy to the other. I'm just wondering which way around would be best.
Because I think, to be frank to Martin went beyond what he needed to do at that meeting, and I'm grateful that he's in seat. Actually, I think we should give him credit for that.
Yeah. Does everyone agree? No.
Yeah.
No.
I do agree, but I just wonder whether it would be an opportunity for a press release, because this did make the press previously, and particularly highlighting that it appears that this is no longer a site with development plan.
We'd have to be very careful there, wouldn't we? We don't libel anyone.
Yes, we also have to be quite careful because the existing approval has been activated by doing this archaeology. If you weren't on planning, so you won't remember, but the original plan was for blocks of traditional style brick houses with tiled roofs. And when Brio took the site over, they proposed modular buildings, essentially stacks of shoeboxes, which required levelling the site so that you didn't get different heights of floor levels and things. Now, that's the one that's been withdrawn.
Not the original.
Not the original.
I do remember.
And the archaeology condition was on the original application.
I do remember it because it was such a significant development. It did come to full council, so I do remember the presentations.
Yes, it was going to follow Buckingham vernacular with chimneys and everything to the original ones. Councillor Stutchbury.
I think it's right in a sense that we do need to be seen to be talking about this. But I think if I could just say, we talk about what's in the public domain, we do a press release around the written response, because that has been published. So anything in that published has.
Yes, but I watched the meeting and I saw Mr. Tet say something.
Yeah, well, I think we can add that because that's in the public domain. That webcast will only stay up for 6 months. So we have to gather those words in very carefully while you have a net. Because those words obviously were really well meant. So I think if we can encapsulate what his own words were, encapsulate what the response was, and maybe note that we discussed it because we had the response to the question, which was asked to be put by the town council to myself, and then anybody else got anything relevant to it, add to it. Because I think if we don't flag it up and keep it in the public domain, you're right, Margaret, it will sink back down. The reason I didn't raise it until after the election because there was no point in raising it before the election, because it would just got sunk during the election and been seen as electioneering. This is far more important. It's about Buckingham's history.
So, Margaret's proposed that.
Yes,
a second read. Yeah, but we just have to be very, very careful. We do nothing libelous and against Brio homes or businesses.
Yeah.
Because we don't fully know what the situation is, but we can skirt around all that.
I think it's important, as already said, that this is a significant finding.
Yeah.
And I think what we want to do is make people more aware of that, so that there's more maybe public pressure for something to be done about it.
Thank you.
Before we lose the opportunity to do it.
Excellent.
At the very least, we need it dated.
Yeah.
Can I ask that to give it some significance, you know, that there's a supporting statement about the council's concern from the mayor, who's speaking for all the council. If Margaret could say we supported in a supporting statement, because it takes, I've had publicity, it takes the moves it one further to another person. That's a different person talking, and that's more important. And could we ask whether, because I'm sure the Buckingham site have got interesting history of the town, whether a statement could be provided about the importance of it from the Buckingham site, so that it's more than just one person talking about something. The response is about me. I don't want it all to be about me. It's too important. Buckingham.
I'm sure that Mr. Grimsdale is an ideal person to do a statement on it.
We could collaborate with that. Yeah. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Well, have you ever thought that we may not want to build houses on a graveyard? People won't be that happy living on graveyard.
Which
is the basic what it is.
Anybody would propose to put a care home next to the cemetery.
But this is what it is. It's actually a graveyard. You know, you can talk about it all you want about it. So it may not be there, but they were there. And exactly.
It wasn't a graveyard when they started. That was the problem.
It probably wasn't consecrated ground anyway.
No, but even so, people have some strange feelings about it.
Oh, equally, there are a faction of the populace that would be delighted to go there.
So are we
Kevin Gots, I suppose.
So we drafted a press release in conjunction with the Buckingham Society, just drawing attention to that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good one for Halloween too.
And I give Councillor Hardy's proposal that we.
Actually, yes, we did delay it a little bit because we've got enough press releases going on at the moment.
Excellent. Item 8.2 is an updated list of proposal of 10 call-ins. Sadly, it runs to 2.5 pages. But,
Yes, if members want me to start dispensing with the sorted out ones, then to shorten the list, then just say so.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Buckinghamshire Council committee meetings. There's a North Bucks Area Planning Committee. It's held on the 29th of September. There were no Buckingham applications. The strategic sites was again cancelled on September 23rd. Councillor Touchbury.
It wasn't a Buckinghamshire application, but it was quite an important application. If you read the report that was published from the officers, this was, I'm looking at Councillor David, correct me if I get it wrong, is it the Pyramid Wood area, which was the area where the application was on, and Stowe and Buckingham was cited throughout the discussions in the planning meeting of how much importance his application was to Buckingham. Now, the application was for refusal, and the application was then, you can watch the webcast, was then agreed by the members present, which was different to the refusal. There was a very strong report from the officers about the class. It's a development within a historical area which they class as internationally important. So it was quite a different decision that it was against it. And of course, they cited the importance of the applications to Buckingham. You can listen to the discussion. So I only mentioned it to that, and it was against the officer's recommendation. Then it went away for having what they call detailed discussion around it. So it isn't actually, I believe, agreed. It's gone away to officers to do the terms of reference around it. But I do think that we've discussed trees here and one thing and another. It's so rare that we have a planning application at Buckingham North planning application. This was called in apparently to committee to be determined by the local member. and then it was determined against the applicant. So it's quite an interesting one. There's nothing just to watch. If you're interested in
Yes,
Stowe,
I'll have a look at that.
if you're
because
interested looking at Stowe and you're interested in the issue of Stowe and
I'll
the
see what the
area
officer said
where
in
it
the
is,
report as well, because
I'm not commenting on
if it's treason, it's contrary to.
the veracity of the planning application, what it was. That's not what I'm going to comment on, but it was interesting in the view that was so unusual that it was so strongly against the officers. But I think the report from the officer on trees and the importance of them was something which was paid for. It's an independent report. But there's lessons for us to watch and learn in that. You know.
Thank you, Robin, for that. Yeah, Catherine will take a look at that.
Can I just say that the next,
Karen,
I learned today that the next strategic sites committee which was scheduled for the 21st of October, has also just been cancelled. Because we've been keeping an eye on that in the action group. We're expecting a redetermination of all of that.
I wasn't expecting to be able to find that out until at least Wednesday, because it's usually a week before you get the agenda posted.
yeah, Robin,
Just through the chairman, I'm aware that it was called to committee. I haven't seen, unless I've missed it, what the grounds are called to committee. But the recording rules of the council are quite specific. Essentially, you need 15% of the council members recorded. Is it not so with planning?
Well, we have been quoting 3.3 from the Constitution, which would indicate that if 3 members of the ward in question request a call-in, then it is automatically.
Yeah. The bypass the officers. Yeah.
Is that on planning but not on general call? Because there's calling, which is the calling the decision of the council. The Constitution is quite clear in its.
Paragraph 3.3 is under planning.
So it's under planning. It's just that I was mildly confused that it was went through. I wasn't objecting to that, but it was mildly confused. It went through such a low bar.
I should add that they are still considering whether it should be returned to a committee because of its previous approval at committee, now nearly a year ago.
I will watch them.
I think the 3 members have dug around and found some serious flaws in that.
Particularly the S1, is it?
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm going to read the Constitution again. And I didn't know that 3.3. It's a very big document. It's about like that, and it's like sort of spreading cheese around, isn't it?
Right, item 10, to receive item correspondence from the Oxford Cambridge ARC group, Mr. D. Rogers, just putting out their reasons for why it shouldn't take place, but that then opens the door for us to receive and discuss a response to the following: creating a vision for the Oxford Cambridge ARC. This was sent to us by the last council meeting, proposed by Councillor Stutchbury, seconded by Councillor Cole, and unanimously agreed to refer consultation outline members' concerns, which are listed on the agenda. The discussion on this, Councillor Harley.
Well, I noticed that the Department of has changed its name now to the Department of Levelling Up Housing Communities. On the basis of levelling up would mean surely not building a huge development like this in this part of the country, but it would make much more sense to build it somewhere rather further north of here, to areas which have been deprived for many, many years for that level of investment in both housing and infrastructure. So can we suggest to the Minister, Councillor Bongobi, not Councillor, Minister Bongobi, as he's been called by the Prime Minister, that actually he should follow the new title of his department and relocate this ARC to maybe some connection between perhaps Leeds University and the University of Manchester. Would make much more sense, I think.
That's very precise. That's the thought.
Okay, so I think we should call it the Cambridge or the Department of Levelling Bucks, because I go through that. I mean, we have to be really honest about this. There's several elements of this we have to watch. Flipping this around this isn't going to get us there. When this proposal came forward in its infancy, it wasn't called the Cambridge Arc, it was government spatial strategy proposal, which was for 100,000 houses across the South East under a previous Secretary of State. Then it came back as the Cambridge Arc, and as you can see in the document, it's everything from Northampton, Oxfordshire, Cambridge, Milton Keynes, Buckinghamshire, Bedfordshire, and Peterborough. So Peterborough gets a mention. So this is a large area of development. You will remember the government said that it was in an earlier pronunciation before they knew the term levelling up, which is a new term. It's rather like localism. It will last as long as it's fashionable. So they've got this business that there is 2 accommodations possibly the size of Milton Keynes between that area and Arc. If you compare that to what HS2 has done with the width of the development of HS2 and how much woodland and environmental damage that has done, and as I think earlier points were made very wisely by Caroline Cummings about trees being valuable because of their carbon intake, and taking mature trees out is as damaging because while they're mature, they're actually taking more carbon in than you are as whole trees. So I think we have to challenge it and ask what environmental grounds they have to wish to do this building. The other thing is it's not sustainable because when they originally done this, you remember one took a motion some time ago to the District Council against the Cambridge Arc. It became very fashionable. One was at the Buckinghamshire Council. We had an election, then it became fashionable to cancel the Cambridge Arc. But none of these developments have got infrastructure. So the thing that this was built on was the platitude of the Cambridge Arc infrastructures. And my view is that I don't suggest in any way, shape and form that we ask them to reinvigorate the Cambridge Arc. What I'm saying is it's not sustainable. There's no development infrastructure. It can't be based around a single railway track, which happens to run through Winslow and happens to run between 2 destinations. So, and also, my other concern to go on is the government's white paper is still there. The government's white paper was quite prolific in its wish to hand over whole chunks of the development to be undertaken by developers and councils having to negotiate with the developers at an onset of a development for a Section 106 agreement, stroke, seal, stroke, whatever. Well, you can imagine the length of time of a development for something like Milton Keynes to be built. What you negotiate at the beginning is going to, with inflation, be absolutely worth pennies. So the whole thing is not thought through. So I think they need to go back, use the term levelling up, and level up their devices, and what you use for leveling up is called a spirit level. And my spirit level on this is it doesn't measure up. It's got no economic policy that supports it. It's got no ecological policy that supports it. You've got to remember when all these policies came forward, these discussions, we were not in the situation we are today where the environment is so challenged, and we can see that with what we read has happened in Europe and one other place. We will be taking out the large chunk of forest, effectively. Hedges are forest, let's not forget that when you take hedge out, you've taken out an ecosystem and a forest. It's a miniature forest, but it's still a forest.
Councillor Such,
so I think that those
Councillor Such, we've had 3.5 minutes. Could we? We've got other people wanting.
I know, but I think I need.
You could just wind up.
I think I have wound up, Chairman. You know, when I say levelling up, put the spirit level on it doesn't measure up.
Thank you. I want to bring Sheena in. She's waiting very patiently there. Sheena, Robin just mentioned the white paper, which we understood there's going to be a U-turn on. That the government decided there are being sufficient houses built. There's 1.1 million outstanding planning approvals that haven't yet been taken up by developers. What is the current situation?
To answer that question first, somewhat mixed messages coming out of the Conservative Party conference last week, and obviously comments from Robert Jenrick about how this should be achieved. I think we have to wait now until the response to the planning consultation comes out from the government to know exactly what they're thinking about. I think there's obviously much discussion in the background, but to get a clear guidance, I think they've said it's due probably next month, the end of this month. I'd suspect maybe next month, given what was said at conference.
I mean, obviously the trigger for all this housing was going to be the East-West Expressway, which that was cancelled, but the housing not.
Not necessarily, because you still got the East-West Railway. So that was part of the arc. The expressway was another part of the consideration, though not necessarily one that the original documentation of this, which is the National Infrastructure Commission's report, was built around. This is a desire to take one step back. This is a desire to develop the area between Cambridge and Oxford as the knowledge corridor. Yes, there's the East-West Railway that's there, which would support this, but they were looking at other things as well. It's not just a question of whether there's a road there or a railway there. It might be that there will need to be infrastructure, which sort of brings me to the point where I need clarification from councillors. The consultation, which is due tomorrow night at 11:45 for responses, is on the spatial framework. This isn't whether this is going to happen or not. This is what are the priorities for any future development. So there's two consultations still to happen. There's this consultation, and then they will bring forward a draft spatial framework around this time next year, and there'll be an intermediary consultation in the spring of next year. So there are actually very specific questions on this consultation, and I'm afraid whether or not this should be cited here or whether or not this is the best way to proceed are not actually covered. So I would suggest that that might need to be a separate letter to the minister responsible to draw your concerns to his attention. I don't think the questions on this consultation will cover those points. There are a couple of things I can raise, such as how any future changes to planning law might affect such consultation, but I don't think the fundamental questions that are being discussed will fit into this framework.
Yeah, we did actually list 4 points here, salient points we're concerned with. We think that would be adequate to put in a letter form to the minister.
Yes, I mean, in terms of this consultation, if you don't want the council to respond to the consultation because you're opposed to the Cambridge ARC and Oxford Cambridge ARC, that's fair enough. There's certainly, the consultation is raising some really interesting points about the environment, design, the importance of the environment, and the delivery of infrastructure before development, etc. But if councillors are not wanting to respond at that point, that's fair enough. I'm not going to have to rush around doing 60 questions before 11:45 tomorrow night.
Thank you for the advice, Sheena. Councillor Stutchbury.
It's twofold, really, Sheena. We now know that policy, long gone are the days where Parliament was where you make policy. It appears you make it on the back of an envelope at a party conference, announce it, and everyone has to run around waiting for government papers to be drafted. It's where we've got to. These really important issues, it shouldn't be done like that. It should be done through Parliament with announcements properly, how it used to be done, with proper scrutiny and division. You are right about the eco. It goes in the sense round. We would support anything clearly where it protects the ecological environment. Anything which it goes into lots of paragraphs about sustainability. But we have to remember this document in itself. The questions are those normal types of questions you've got in these that you're left with a limited choice unless you write a long response to each thing. So I think we'd be wise to say we support development with infrastructure. I think we'd be wise to say we don't support any development which is not sustainable and ecologically sound. And also, there's nothing in this, there's not one word, as I found it, and China, please correct me if I'm wrong, that mentions economical, sustainable, affordable accommodation for the next generation. It's not mentioned. There's nothing in here, in this, that says that's going to be a priority, is to house the next generation, house people on lower incomes. Because the whole business model will fail if there's no one to work. If you can't live in the area where you want to have the growth, are we going to bus in from another area further, whatever, people to actually come and do the jobs for these people? There's nothing in it. So I think it's failing, is it doesn't recognise the socially damaging situation there is in Buckinghamshire and probably everywhere else, that there is not enough affordable accommodation. When I say affordable, I mean affordable, not falsely affordable accommodation, not this notion of affordable. It's not mentioned in there. If somebody can find me the paragraph with this,
Yes.
please correct me. Because I didn't see it.
It's on page 10, I think. It's very difficult to reference. And then under a 1, and then there's a number of bullet points, and it's at the top. Just the third from the end bullet point on page 10. So in fact, it's at the top of page 11. More available homes, more affordable homes.
Well, that's just weasel words of no consequence. I mean, I could write that on every post on Facebook. You want a substantial policy of how you're going to address that. That's not policy. That's just throwaway words like levelling up. It needs to be in there. There's nothing in there about housing the integral population that live in North Buckinghamshire who'd be able to stay here, do the teaching jobs, work in the NHS, which I think COVID has showed us where the most important jobs are. There's nothing in there to support these people. Saying that we'd like to do that, there has to be a policy with it. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything.
Thank you, Councillor Stark. Councillor Hardy.
I think this will resolve whether we're going to ask Sheena to answer lots of questions before 11:45 by tomorrow night or not, or whether we're going to go with sufficiently with what's already here on the agenda, plus perhaps adding in our emphasis upon housing for all, as it were, to support the rural economy. And indeed the urban economy. Yeah,
as we heard Sheena say, if we're against the development of this ARC, then there's no point in filling in the request for consultation. Better that we write to the Minister with our own views, which have already been put before the Council. The Council has mandated this committee to respond on its behalf, so perhaps the thing to do is get Paul to write directly to the Minister with those points that are on the agenda, adding in what Robin's saying about there's a lack of direction and addressing accommodation, affordable accommodation.
That's your proposal, Chair.
Sheena has a hand raised. Sheena has a hand raised.
Yeah, sorry, Sheena.
Yes, just to say, can I just clarify a point for councillors? This is not a plan. So Councillor Stutchbury's concern about there being no detail, there would not necessarily be detail at this point because this is a spatial framework. I didn't even come on board the Buckingham Neighbourhood Plan until after you'd done the spatial framework. So that was done prior to my time, but I'm sure some councillors will remember that stage in the neighbourhood plan where it is developing broad themes rather than actual plan detail. It's in part 5 of the consultation document. It is one of the questions, as I just try and juggle documents here, which does ask about the availability and affordability of housing and how important you consider that to be in the development. And it ranges from not important to very important in the range of possible responses. But just to clarify that point for councillors, we wouldn't be expecting to see detail at this point. These are the broad themes from which they will then develop a future plan.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, thank you. I just have, although I understand writing to the minister, I think it's a really good idea, but can it not be both and? Because I just have some concerns that we're missing an opportunity to comment if we fail to respond to this consultation. And we can respond in the way already suggested and raise the issue, but perhaps including the issue about affordable housing as a priority in any future plans, as well as writing to the minister with our concerns.
Yeah, I mean, our problem now is we've got 24 hours in which to do this.
But we've already got those on the agenda, those points, haven't we?
Yeah.
If we raise those points, add the affordable housing issue, then I think we've got the outline of our response.
But including it in the consultation is what.
This is an additional point, Chairman. It's an additional point. Though I respect what Sheila says about it doesn't give strategy, but it does say that they only wish to meet carbon emissions by 2040. They put that in the plan, that they only wish to lower carbon emissions for 2040. We all know that the world 2040 is too late and 2030 is the target. And it also says, and no later than 2050. So they've set themselves targets on the environment in that. So I think we do need to say that those targets don't recognise good science, because good science says that you set yourself a really good target and they're not there. So they're putting details in there where they choose to, which backs government policy, which is by 2050, where the people who have been campaigning on the environment from 2030, so I think, they put detail where they want to put detail and not. So I don't think this is very big on the environment. So I think we need to ask them the question around the 2040, but no later than 2050. Well, 2050 might be too late. The damage might have happened by then.
So the next question is, if we do as the Mayor suggests, then how do we do it, Catherine?
Well, most of these sort of questionnaires, you don't have to fill in every question in order to move on to the next. And I think I've probably got a fairly good idea of Councillor's answers to the vital questions, and we just skip the others. I mean, Sheena's got her own life to live, but and then there are 5 sides of questions.
Yeah, that's what we're...
And that's printing them out at Calibri at 11. I mean, those are the questions selected out of the text. So I can go through tomorrow, I can fill in the ones that you're concerned about, I can skip the ones that you're not so concerned about, and we will have registered a response before the time.
Thank you.
I have 12 pages of notes, Catherine, for you.
I propose that we accept Catherine's suggestion.
Karen.
I would just like to say that I filled this consultation in 2 times. Once spent 2 hours this afternoon with my colleagues from Maidstone Parish Council. So we have filled one in on behalf of Parish Council, and I filled on a personal basis. And I think the main point, if I may, is that this whole scheme was, as Sheena said, was constructed by the National Infrastructure Commission 6 years ago in a pre-pandemic world, and it was seen, I think, very much as an overspill for London, which is really a nonsense. And the whole concept that in Maidstone we believe is pushing investment and more people into already overheated southeastern area. I totally believe in levelling up. Goodness knows, let's hope it goes ahead.
What is it?
But surely this type of concentration on one area is wrong for the whole country. And I think those are the basic points.
I think the letter to the minister could point out that he is the minister for levelling up.
Indeed.
So we should go up country a bit.
It takes 2 hours.
As
Thank
John
you.
suggested.
So is everyone agreeing? Thank you very much, Catherine, for that.
Showing what a spirit level it's on.
Right, enforcement, any new breaches report from anyone? No, that's a.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Oh, right. It would have been a first. Catherine.
And I think this has been reported to Catherine from one of us. It's about the plastic door replacing a listed door in 1 Manor Street house.
Oh, I reported that I don't know how long ago.
And we're still no enforcement.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
enforcement are quite speedy on some things, they're not so speedy on another.
Yes.
But yes, Ian reported that to me as soon as he saw it. I photographed it, I sent it off
Brilliant.
months ago now.
Nothing to do.
Right, reminder, thank you. Robin?
I think it'd be worth looking at it at another meeting. You will be aware that through enforcement, let's say that the powers of Lacehill Residents Association, which are somewhat, when it comes to their development, are quite tremendous, and which I have given some assistance to, but mainly by them, they've managed to get a reverse decision to actually build the swale. The swale, you all know, was the small lake adjacent to the balancing pond to do with the industrial thing, but it was built incorrect. We raised that, you may recall, some time back as an enforcement case. Sadly, it would appear, though they had to get a new application, which they put in, they've started work on it again. So they've started work on it before the planning application has been verified by planning. I've personally written to them about this because that is responsibility of board member. And I've copied Catherine into it because I think it's too important because of our connection with the estate. Can I ask that we, through Catherine, write our own concerns around the fact, because it cannot be right, can it? It was built wrong the first time. Necessitating an enforcement thing to get them to build it right the second time, then they start building it before the planning has been determined. So there's every possibility it'll be built wrong again, and because no one's been and done it. This isn't the way planning should operate in Buckinghamshire. And I put those words as such in my correspondence. I expect Catherine marvelled at the amount of spelling mistakes in it, but
I didn't have time.
but you don't have time to count the spelling mistakes.
Which is an enforcement matter.
And I think it's an enforcement matter, so I ask that we give them support because.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other breaches? No. Applications to fell trees, you've seen the list. Quarterly update, no changes from the June update. Matters to report, any damage, superfluous or redundant signage in the town, access issues or other urgent matters?
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I've noticed there are still some of our notices up. There's one quite near to in Shandles Park, quite close to the bridge. We've still got one of our summer activities posters up with the list of events. And on the next poster along, there's the autumn winter one, but the summer one hasn't been removed. And it does bother me when we've got some of our own posters up that are past there.
So perhaps we could ask Lee and his team when they're doing the rounds.
It's very easy to overlook some.
Yeah.
It is a concern.
Councillor Hart.
I would say if you see something that's out of date, take it off.
Yeah, I would do if I carried the appropriate tools on my person, but I've tried using scissors and it just breaks. You need something.
You need snips or a scalpel.
You need something like this, you see.
And you carry one that's all
I
covered.
carry secateurs.
Yeah, well, I need to add those to the
That's a
list I
stuff break.
take out.
It's not saying what, but if you notice that we had all these signs put up during the COVID pandemic, they were up. And that lots of them now are either swiveled left, swiveled right, tops of the post or whatever, because either wind, weather, or enthusiasm has moved them around. Couldn't we go ask them what their plans with these signs are and what maintenance they've got to maintain them? Because obviously they were needed for the distancing. Either their time has passed, or they need to be maintained, replaced, and put up. Because if you go around, lots of them are around now. They're not our property; they're Buckinghamshire Council's property. I presume on their posts, and they're drifting all over the place. So I think we need to know what they're going to do with them. Are they going to just maintain them? And because otherwise
They're clutter.
They're clutter. They're not doing anything.
Thank you, Gordon. If no one else has anything, I do. I sent photographs out this afternoon about these yellow trailers that are appearing all over North Bucks with signs on. You can't read the sign, the picture I sent out, it actually said always wear your seatbelt, which has been law for 45 years now. Others say don't drink and drive. Some of them say 20 in the villages is enough. But these are not necessarily on the railway truck routes. I mean, some of them on the A422, which they don't use, some on the A421, some are down at Padbury and Winslow. Transport for Bucks is pleading they haven't got money for street lighting, for instance in Gingerk Road, they haven't got money for potholes. I would propose that we ask them why they have spent it's obviously a lot of money on these things, and for what purpose they serve, how many are there, and how much have they cost. I think we should be told, because this is taxpayers' money they're using when they're pleading poverty in other areas. And to my mind, as a taxpayer, they're total waste of time.
Agreed.
I think it's worth asking. It'll probably come back that it was East West Railway HS2, but we need to know. But also, I was really cheered up with them because I saw at the weekend there was a statue of Barbara Castle erected, and as she introduced seatbelts and don't drink drive, I think Barbara would be really pleased to see these. The message is now being carried out by Buckinghamshire Conservative Council, are actually listening to Barbara Castle. Bring back Barbara.
Unfortunately, they're not so angled that she can see them for where she is.
But I believe Barbara's watching us. I think she'll be.
So could I have some support?
Yes,
Thank you. So if we could write to Transport for Bucks, thank you very much. And just to say, Steve Pring at the last meeting pointed out a number of redundant signs, including Nightingale Rise on the A421. They've gone today, so
Good on.
thank you whoever did that. The signs for St Rumbold's are still up, but that is still
Well,
current.
then that's fair enough.
current.
That's
So thank you, Steve Pring, and thank you for reporting out. Councillor Try.
There seems to be a lot of, is it leaders signs coming up as well for rented accommodation?
Where?
There's a few
All over
on
the
Page Hill and
estate
I've
agents.
only seen
They're legitimate.
outside houses, but
No,
where are we looking?
well, no, there's one at the top of my road, but nobody in the road. I know because they're allowed to put them close, aren't they? They don't have to be right
It's got to
outside.
be on the curtilage or within.
They're on the bypass.
Yeah, there's one on the bypass as well.
Both ends
Yes.
of the bypass are covered. And
They
I asked
need
for
it-
them to
they
be
need a
released a month
again.
ago. And
I'm
they
sure
said,
it's leaders.
Yes, I'm pretty certain.
you're right, Councillor Try, asked them
Well,
to
I can take
remove
a
the
picture of the one
previous
at the top of the
meeting.
order,
at the
but if they're
environment
not within the
listed up.
curtilage, then they're not legal.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
Okay, thank you for that.
Certainly if they're on the
Understand why
bypass,
they
you
haven't
can't even
been
tell which
removed.
house that's.
well, no, I thought they were allowed to put them there if it was sort of.
They want
close.
to hire a roundabout, they can ask the Environment Committee and we'll give them a roundabout. and they can have
Roundabout,
leaders
they
on the
can
roundabout.
sponsor it, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Chairman's items for information, I have none. Date of the next meeting, Monday, 1st November, following the interim council. Thank you, everybody tonight. Sheila, particularly thank you to you.
Yeah, thank you.
With that, we can.
Thank you.
Close the meeting. Thank you.